sometimes the communication is not great. Sometimes, there are raised voices, and sometimes, your wife's cross with you or you're cross with your wife. But I think communication of any type is better than no communication. I think relationships die from neglect when you just can't be bothered to communicate anymore.
Hey, what is up, everybody? It is Ed Gow Jr. of Dad Central and the Dad Central Show. And I can't do these things without
Drew Solon of Dad Central and the Dad Central Show.
Absolutely.
I think we're getting this down now, Ed.
We're getting it down. We're getting it down. You're feeling me a little bit. So before we go any further, the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care about themselves and others, there is a positive impact. So what is going on in your world, Drew?
What isn't going on in my world with 5 kids, a 6-month-old baby, lots happening. I think for me, it's try to juggle the schedule and the demands and the changes that are just part of life. So some days it feels like I'm in demand everywhere, which can be hard to manage. And other days, most days actually are starting to feel like that now.
Yeah, I wouldn't say
some days you feel like you have a handle. And so those are good days. So it's learning to remember our conversation with Paul Sullivan of the Company of Dads. It's really your ability to adapt to, on a sort of moment by moment basis. And I'm finding that to be very true these days. How about you? What's up in your world?
What's going on in my world? Well, there's a number of things. My world always seems to be revolving. Really excited for our viewers and our family of the Dad Central Show. We have a number of we already had amazing people come on the show, but more people coming from all different areas. Everything from, we've got a sleep expert to we have an expert about handling your kids in school if they don't want to go to school. How do you make that happen? So we've got a lot of exciting things going on with the Dad Central Show. Lots of things, good things going on. And just like you said, sometimes you're just trying to, that old like shell game, you got the shells, you just like maneuver it all around, but a lot of exciting stuff coming with the Dad Central Show and Dad Central. So I'm really excited about that. People, hey, I got my water here. I drink 3 of these a day, dads and family, 3 to 4 liters of water every day. And as I said to Drew offline the other day, I'm slowly but surely going to like a 70% plant-based diet, and the results are fantastic.
That's exciting. That's what I've heard from you. And our show that we did back in the summer about prioritizing our health as dads is actually one of the most popular shows. Listens and downloads. And so clearly dads get that message, Ed, and you're living that example out. I'm trying to, I did hit the gym yesterday. I'm trying to live that example out. But I think it may be, as we talk about these guests coming up, dad's health is also an important topic. So we'll be able to touch on a lot of those. And I think today, our guest is going to be talking about dad's health as well, mental health in particular, because today we're talking to James MacDonald. He is the creator and host of the Dad Mind Matters podcast. He's also a recently published author. He's got a book, which is really helpful if you're a new dad. And he's also a dad to 3 kids. So James, we're really looking forward to this conversation, and welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, guys. Really, really excited to be here.
So for people who are North American based, you can tell that James is from across the pond. So
the accent's a giveaway.
So just before we go any further, James, where are you based in this place called the world?
I lived just outside Brighton, which is on the south coast of the UK. So if you were in London and you drove straight down to the coast, you would basically hit Brighton. And I've been here. I've lived here for 20 years. Came down as a student and decided to stay.
Excellent. Drew, I'll let you open up the questioning.
Yeah, well, James, for us, we really love our listeners to get a glimpse into, kind of how you became where you are right now. Podcast host and author talking about dad's mental health. And we like to do that by getting a little insight into your early years. So can you just share a little snippet of like, what was life like for James growing up?
I had a good, I enjoyed, had a good, background. I'm one of three children. I was heavily into sport when I was at school. I loved rugby and drama. I was always quite an anxious child, and this kind of made a bit of sense when I kind of in 2010, after sort of doing some work with a counsellor, I found out I had OCD, which kind of explained some of the anxiety I had and the depression. And the thing I found that really worked was kind of creative outlets, be that sport or be that, which is probably why, the idea of setting up a podcast and doing content creation and writing a book to try and help dads guys who are about to become dads has really helped me. So yeah, that's kind of the background. And I think it's the thing with a podcast or a YouTube channel, the real gift is that actually when you become part of the community, and when you get to interact with other like-minded people, and the thing I love about it is just talking to other dads. It's just because when you're becoming a parent is so intense. It's the most intense experience you will ever go through, I think. I mean, am I right in thinking, did I hear that right? You've got 5 children.
Yes.
Yeah, you see, I'm now in no position to complain ever about the fact that I have 3 children, and even though we've just recently got a puppy, which you might be wondering, why has he got a cut on the nose? Basically, we've got this 14-year-old golden retriever puppy who's lovely, but likes to poo under the kitchen table and attack me when she goes upstairs, which she's not allowed, and I bring her down, and she's really not impressed. Yesterday I got a bite on the nose, so. Yeah, but mate, fair play, 5 kids. That's. I hope someone is getting some sleep in your house. I imagine it's probably not you.
Well, you know what, Krista, my partner, is phenomenal, and she is so kind to me. So I get pretty good sleep, but we both work, I think, really hard at navigating, creating an atmosphere for our kids that is positive and healthy as best we can, while also taking care of ourselves, which is not always that easy with all those demands. But you talk about your upbringing, being involved in sports, but also feeling that you were an anxious child. What was it, I guess, as you're growing up, that maybe helped with those nerves or that anxiousness? Was it just the sport, or was there anything else?
I think the creative. I think once I found I love doing drama. I was always in the school play. I sang in the choir. I played a couple of instruments, and I found that really helped. I think that kind of really helped deal with a lot of the nervous energy, because at that point I had no idea that I had this thing, OCD. Although now it kind of makes sense, because I definitely remember being quite obsessive about things. I would get very nervous about sort of locking things and checking things, and that that worried me, because I was like, well, this isn't something that I see other people doing, or even my brother and sister doing. At times I got really worried, because am I going a bit crazy? So I think just being on stage, which is and performing in front of people, which can be a nerve-wracking thing. I think probably because I was always used to having sort of living with a state of anxiety, being on stage probably didn't seem as bad as it maybe did for other people, if you know what I mean, because I kind of was living at this constant state of kind of anxiety. Yeah.
Okay. And how did your parents handle that, or what was that dynamic like between your parents as you're realizing some of these things and were like even starting to be concerned about it?
I don't think they were hugely aware. I think I did some quite good masking of it. I think I was quite good at kind of keeping a lid on it, and I think they probably just thought I was a bit of a worrier, a bit of a kind of, I mean, I think mental health issues are a relatively new thing. You know, I grew up in the 80s. I don't know if those terms, or we just knew as much about it. So they probably just thought he's dealing with anxiety of just growing up and being a teenager and all the things that we have to deal with.
I'm curious, is there anything that they could have done or would have made you not mask it as much and be like, hey, I want to talk to you about this? Just curious. Again, because parents could be listening whom they might be saying, hey, well, my child's kind of like what James just described. Maybe there's hindsight that they can maybe gain if you have any thoughts on that.
I think the best thing you can do for your children, and my parents were very good at it, and they can only deal with what information I give them. But I think if you always keep communication, just always take an interest, and if your kids are quiet or a bit reserved, worried about it, don't be afraid to push a bit and kind of like, are you sure you're okay? Because you're really quiet and I'm worried. And I sometimes find with my kids, if I say, look, I'm sure you're fine, but I'm worrying about you. So, put it on yourself, because kind of that can empower them to go, no, Dad, I'm fine. I'm okay. And I sometimes I'm a worrier, I'm a thinker. And they kind of, a lot of my children, it seems they kind of seem to get some comfort from that, because obviously they can see, well, Dad works and he's married and he's got a good life. And I'm very grateful for that. But it's okay to admit that you have some vulnerabilities. That's okay. That doesn't have to be a major, it's who you are. It's just the fabric of who you are. And I think I've always found whenever you're really honest about how you feel with your mental health and your struggles, it only inspires and empowers other people to go, do you know what? I feel just like that sometimes. And sometimes you have to be the brave one and kind of be the first, person to sort of put your hand up and be honest about how you're feeling.
Yeah, probably not very easy for many dads, especially, as you said, 80s, 90s, when a lot of dads were growing up, mental health, emotional health, that stuff wasn't talked about. It was just, kind of suck it up and get going. So yeah, it's an uncomfortable, new, but important aspect, I'd say. Okay, Ed, you want to hop in here, or can I ask a next question?
No, I just want to jump in right quick here. Based on what you said about your parents not recognizing some of your challenges, what was your relationship like with your dad?
It was good. It was, I had a great relationship with my dad. But I think we talked through sport. I think we were both into rugby. When I was an adult, we talked a lot more about things that worried me, and he was always a really supportive man. I don't think he had the easiest upbringing, his background. So I think you can only do as good a job as a parent as you've seen modeled to you. So sometimes, if you think, God, my parents aren't doing a very, good job, or they're doing the best they can, and they're only doing what they've seen, how they were parented. So I think I spent a lot of time, we went and used to go and watch rugby matches, and whenever I played, he used to watch me, and that meant a lot to me. We had a good relationship. He sadly died a couple of years ago, but I really felt that we had a good relationship. And actually, the book I wrote recently, I dedicated to him, because he worked in insurance for 20 years, and he said the best insurance you can get for life is the love and support of your friends and family, which I think is pretty astute. Life is going to throw all sorts of curveballs at you, but if you have friends and family and you develop and strengthen those relationships, you're going to be okay. You're going to be able to find ways and solutions to get through whatever you're dealing with.
Love the message that your dad gave about your friends and your family. That's just really, really powerful. Really like that a lot. Maybe I'm jumping the gun on that, but how much in your parenting now do you emulate from what your dad showed you?
Probably a lot, actually. I mean, I don't think his life wasn't that easy. I think he had some stresses and some mental health issues, but he was a really kind man and he was really fair. And I really admired him. And I think a lot of what I want to be as a dad is basically how I was brought up, how he parented me. Definitely.
Well, I think that's a powerful statement right there, that not every dad says that about their dad. So I want to bless you about that in regards to that. And Drew, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, and I echo Ed's comments about your father and his message about, the greatest insurance you'll ever have. The word that came to mind for me is what an amazing legacy to leave with his children of that powerful message. So and you get to repeat it and carry that forward. So that's really wonderful. So I really want to say that same thing that Ed said. But now maybe let's transition and talk about your becoming a dad. Because I think that became the impetus for you to ultimately be where you are now and doing some of the contributions and creative work that you're doing around supporting dads in mental health. So talk to us about your journey becoming a dad. What were the fears, the hopes, or challenges that came up, and then how you might have managed them?
I first became a dad in 2012, and I think like all dads, during trying to support my partner through pregnancy, I was really worried. Was I going to be okay? Was my mental health going to be okay? My mental health has been a bit of an ongoing battle throughout my life. I had the same fears of, will I just fall to pieces? And, really, in that I'm not the one who's actually growing a baby in me and having to do the childcare. How would that be viewed if I was struggling? And I think that's the problem a lot of dads feel. They get anxiety. They worry about, how am I going to provide for my family? How am I going to support my partner? How am I going to support my own mental health? And because of that, tend to clam up and not talk, which is the problem. Because I think a lot of dads worry, well, it's going to be seen as a weakness, and that's not a good thing in our society. And I think, well, actually, no. Talking about how you're feeling and your worries and concerns is actually emotional intelligence, and you're much better off having a conversation with your partner. And actually, if I think about all the situations as a parent with my wife, all the tough times have just strengthened us, actually. And I think a lot of the time when I shared with my wife that I was struggling, or I didn't feel like I was doing a good job, or I was worried, it kind of empowered her to either say, I feel the same, and actually, if you're vulnerable and you have the strength of character to go, I want to do my best, but I need some help, I need some direction. That's all right, I think, to ask that.
Thank you, James, for sharing that. And I really want you, though, to drill down on that, because the importance of a dad sharing his challenges with his partner, that doesn't happen all the time. And a lot of times I share with men and dads that there's a lot of dads and men that are screaming and nothing's coming out. So I just want you to share with our audience the importance, especially our dads, to share with their partner if and when they're having a challenge.
I think you've just got to be really brave and take that leap of faith. And it will feel like the last thing you want to do. But I think there's two ways of looking at it. If you're worried about being really honest with your wife, your partner, about anxiety or mental health, well, do you know what? If you share it with something and your partner can't handle it, then sadly that probably means that the relationship has problems. I have to say, I've never regretted being really brave and doing it. And actually, it's always empowered my wife to support me and usually share the similar anxieties or worries she has. And then when she's gone through difficult times, because she knows I can handle it, she's okay to share stuff. Sometimes you've got to kind of say, look, it takes a lot of courage to say, I'm really struggling. And I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling nervous, I don't feel like I'm doing well at this. Actually, it shows an immense amount of emotional intelligence. And you're right, not everyone has that self-awareness. So I think just trust in yourself. Just actually, if the worst thing you can do is say nothing. Actually, say something. Say, there've been times in my marriage when if I felt too emotional to talk about something, I've sent my wife a letter or I've sent a long email, and that's often a really good way to deal with like confrontation. You know, or if there are things you're really worried about, if you send it in a letter when you're not face to face, it's not confrontational, and therefore it's not emotional. And you know, so that can be one way. If you just think, I just can't do it, I just can't tell my wife I'm struggling because I'm worried she'll get cross or she'll judge me. Or if you have the strength of character to actually, and the mental fortitude to sort of say, I'm going to sit down and write a letter. It shows, I think, to your partner how invested you are in your relationship. And I only think it's going to inspire them to go, wow, this is me and my husband, you know, we can, because life's going to chuck stuff at you. And actually, marriage is hard, you know, because quite often the person you meet is not the person they change, you change. And, you know, quite often I think women's women can be completely different as mums as they are when you meet them as, you know, and that's just what it is. And I think the relationships that work are the ones that are versatile and say, look, this is an adventure. And the one thing I think that is absolutely paramount is communication. Don't be scared to rock the boat. I had some really good advice on a TikTok the other day, and it said, don't be scared to rock the boat in your relationship early on. If someone's behaving badly, you're within your rights to call it and say, hang on a minute, that's not, you know, because if you don't speak up, you're basically just going to have deep down resentment. So sometimes the communication is not great. Sometimes, you know, there are raised voices, and sometimes, you know, your wife's cross with you or you're cross with your wife. But I think communication of any type is better than no communication. I think relationships die from neglect when you just can't be bothered to communicate anymore. When you're like, I'm just over it. If you communicate, it shows you're invested. You're like, I want to, you know, I want to fight through this difficult time we're going through. And when I look back on all the times that I felt most close to my wife, it's when times were hard. You know, when my dad died, you know, when her father passed away, that's when I thought, right, step up, be the man that she needs you to be. You know, it might not be your turn to do the school run or your turn to take the bins out, but just if you look at your partner and say, they need me to be that guy now, be that guy.
Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs. But not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like-minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step-by-step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library. Curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members-only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this fatherhood thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well-being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca/dads.
first thing I want to say is, it sounds like you and your wife have a great partnership and a good ability to work well together. Not always easy. And I think that's really important and a crucial point for, helping support healthy parenthood for both moms and for dads, is that partnership is crucial. So I just want to acknowledge, it sounds like you've got that, which is very powerful. The other thing is, you started out with this idea that, struggling to possibly share that you were struggling early on as you were becoming a dad. And that reminds me of our podcast with, I think it's Marcus Cranston. He's the author of a book called Dads Kiss Your Sons, and really his journey out of depression. And he talked about that same struggle. Like, here's my wife. She's going through all these changes. She's doing all this hard work. Like, who am I to be even saying something? And he didn't have the ability to share at that point, but eventually he has. And there was a Huffington Post article a couple of years ago that essentially said the same thing, right? Dads are experiencing these pressures, these stresses, these fears, but they don't feel like it's okay for them to talk about it, right? It's taboo. You just got to suck it up and deal with it. So I think it's a really important point that you bring up. And you use the phrase, be brave. And I think I want to add a point on here, and I'd love for you to just share your thoughts on it, is being brave is one thing, but you highlighted this idea of the relationship. And if you can share and it can be received, that to me is also really important, right? And you said if you can't share, or the person gets mad at you, that indicates that the relationships have problems. And then so I'm wondering if you can share, as I wrap it up by saying this, is that I think that one of the most crucial things that we can do as parents, or as about to be parents, is to know and understand what a healthy relationship looks like, and do everything we can to both be a healthy partner, as well as you said, call people on when they're not being healthy partners for you, by establishing healthy boundaries. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you made some really good points there. I think the problem is that people, when they get married, have a vision of what a healthy, the perfect marriage is, and it isn't what marriage is. Marriage is ups and downs from hour to hour, from day to day. And actually, I think the more we can do as dads and as men and as podcasters to say, actually, life is hard all the time. The best thing you can do is be kind to yourself, and kind of just, and have the courage to, as you said, have the courage to actually stand up for yourself sometimes. And because I don't think women are attracted to weak men who, and I don't mean by being physically intimidating, but I think just standing your ground sometimes. And if someone's behaving badly, you're within your point to say, that's not on. That's not. And in the same way that when I'm behaving badly, I admire my wife. It's more attractive. It's more attractive to be married to someone who goes, that's not who you are. That's not who I was married to. That's not who I want to have a family with. You're letting yourself down. That takes a lot of courage. And I think, like any relationship, if you're really lucky to have a mate, a sort of a friend who is someone who tells you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, those they're worth their weight in gold. And I think if you're lucky to have a marriage or a relationship that's like someone that goes, don't do that. That's not who you are. Or, the person who helps you fulfill your potential. And isn't afraid to actually have the difficult conversations. That's a true relationship. You either want a real relationship, and a real relationship, if you think about, looking back on your life as if it was a film, good films are not like that, are they? Good films are not just like, good films are full of adversity. And if you think of all the best times in your life, the best times were quite often followed by really difficult times. When my dad died, I'm suddenly confronted with everything I have. I suddenly feel so grateful to have my children, my home, my wife. It's when you're confronted with the harshities of life that you suddenly realize, I was totally taking that for granted. That's been there the whole time, and I've just taken it for granted. Sorry, I've completely I have a habit of rambling. I think I've forgotten your original question. But I think just the problem with, I think, like social media and Instagram and people looking at other people's lives through this filter, which doesn't exist, it's really unhelpful and it's really damaging. And quite often, like on the school run, like I picked the kids up from school today, and I walked past a dad whose kid was having a massive meltdown, like in the middle of in the road. And I just looked at him, and he was like, I said, mate, you're doing all right. I said, that was me yesterday. I think if you can share with someone else, because I think the worry is when it's your kid doing that, you're like, everyone's judging me. No one's judging you. And actually, if they are judging you, they're not sort of people you want to hang around with anyway. We're all going through battles. And one of the best things about becoming a dad is I suddenly felt that there was this wave of sort of love and support from other parents, quite often people I've never met before. You know, you'd be out with your kid and struggling with something like, or they'd be having a massive meltdown. And it always amazed me how like some other parents would be like, "Are you all right? Can I help?" You know, that's such a wonderful thing to have. And I think that's one of the best things about becoming a parent. You do kind of join this club of people who it's not, you know, it's not like, look how fantastic I am. It's like, well, maybe, but how real are you being? How authentic are you being? And I think being really authentic about your role as a man, you know, even if that's a man who struggles with his mental health or has major things, the more honest you are, you don't know who you might be inspiring by being really authentic. You might be giving someone else permission to go, it's totally all right to be honest about how I'm feeling. You know, if you can sort of see it as your obligation to go, I struggle with my mental health, but I'm going to show people actually it's okay. You can still achieve all the stuff you want to do, you know, and actually, if anything, use it as a bit of instead of thinking, oh, it's a chink in my armor, think, well, actually, no, maybe it's a bit of a superpower. Maybe the fact that I have battled with depression and I have, you know, real struggles with anxiety, maybe it's given me a sense, maybe it's given me an emotional self-awareness that I can spot other people who are having a crap time. And there's an opportunity to help when I see that.
Yeah, I think a lot of positive messages in there, and very well said. Ed?
Yeah, I have a question about Dad Mind Matters. And when people go to the website, they see the tagline, helping men safely navigate family life without losing their minds. How did you come up with that? Because I think that's a great tagline.
I was lucky. I mean, I worked with, like anything, if you want to create something, and a podcast is like any other venture, any other business. You have to do some research, and you have to spend a bit of time going, well, what do I actually want to do? Because it's not just talking. There's so much more to it. And I worked with a company called Get More Listeners, and they mentored me for a year, and we went through all these different things, like, why are you picking your title? Why are you picking your tagline? What is it you actually want to do here? What is this about? Because I think there's that thing, if you try and speak to everyone, you actually speak to no one. Mm-hmm. What's your message? And I won't be the only dad in the world who has times when they're thinking, how am I going to get through this? I don't know how I'm going to get through this. You always find a way. And I do sometimes feel like there can be times in marriage, in parenting, we think, I feel like I'm going to lose my mind, or I'm going to lose my temper, or I can't, I've got to, your kids can wind you up in way. I mean, it's just, they know how to push the buttons. Because they're you. And quite often, I think if you can see, okay, they're winding me up because they're trying to test their boundaries. They're trying to see how safe they are. That's what they're doing. It's a constant, if I really, how could in control his dad? And I think just knowing that sometimes getting cross, it's okay to get cross, but have a way of dealing with it so that you're not you don't lose your temper, you don't lose, and that's easier said than done, because sometimes you can have a tough day and your kids just won't stop on at something. But if you I always say, look, if your partner's in the house, quite often I'll go for a walk around the block, just get some fresh air, just get out of there, just take the dog for a walk, or just don't be in that space. If that's not possible, go and lock yourself in the loo for 5 minutes, scream into a cushion. And if that happens, don't punish yourself, because actually see that as I'm finding a way. I'm trying to find a coping strategy. It comes back to kindness. Be kind to yourself. Even if you treat yourself half as good as you treat your kids, that's a good start. Because I don't think any of us do. As men, I really don't think we do. We don't do self-care. Largely because, and maybe it's a generational thing, we were probably raised by men that were like, you suck it up, get on with it. Well, okay, but that works to a point. At some point, if you've got some trauma, it's not when that comes. It's not if that comes out. It's when that comes out.
Drew?
Yeah, well, with Dad Mind Matters, and I think that focus that on those moments or those periods of times when we are pushed to the limits where we feel like we're losing our mind, what have you learned that is the most helpful to get through that?
Sense of humor is powerful. If you can laugh at it, then you've won. And I think that's why I try and, I do parody songs where I write about how just sometimes how brutal it can be. If you can laugh at it, then you've taken its power away. And if you can sometimes go, does it really matter if they have another biscuit? Really, on the grand scheme of things, how important is it for them to eat at the table? Okay, in an ideal world, yes. They probably won't still be, eating with their fingers when they're 15. So does it really matter? I think sometimes you've got to think, why is this so important to me? We've all got this perfect idea about what we should be doing as parents. Sometimes you just go, choose your battles. And sometimes if you're really struggling for whatever reason, because you're tired or you've had an argument with your wife or your boss has given you a hard time, just be aware that I might be a bit cranky today. And actually, if letting my kids get away with a bit more means that it's a slightly easier day and we pick it up tomorrow, just do it. Just don't overthink it. Just do it.
Yes, well said. Okay, James, thank you. Ed?
Yeah, I'd like to know, since you started the Dad Matters podcast or Dad Matters journey, how have you become better as a dad?
I think I've been more honest, and I generally try to improve my communication skills. Sometimes, like a lot of people, you talk, you basically wait till your turn. You wait for the other person to stop talking so you can talk. I think it's really important with children who are talking to you, even if you're tired or you're trying to drive somewhere, to actually go, just listen, because there's a finite amount of time when they will want your attention. Mm. And that really, a friend of mine told me that, and that really hit me. My brother and sister have older children, and they said there will be a last time where they want you to hold their hands across the road. There'll be a last cuddle. There'll be a last time that you pick them up. And when that happens, you will miss it more than they will. And the problem is that when they're teenagers, they're not going to want to go, Dad, can we go to the park? Can we get there? But that's not going to happen. Teenagers, the minute you're a teenager, your parents are the least cool thing in your life. So the minute you know that time's not there forever, it suddenly makes it more valuable. So when your kid goes, can we go play table football, or can we come and play, some FIFA on Xbox? Like, even if you're like, that's the last thing I feel like doing, I just want to sit down and just zone out. Go, this time might not be there this time next year. He might not want you to do this, and then you will really miss it. So I think it's made me make more of an effort, because it's a bit hypocritical if I'm creating podcast videos going, 10 ways to be to be a better husband or to be a better listener. Go, well, you're not doing that. So, why are you telling us to do that? So I've got to practice what I preach, basically. So I think when I'm talking to it, when I'm delivering the advice or the suggestions, I've got to actually live that experience.
Thanks, Drew.
I think that's a fantastic way to end today, as far as a great message for dads, sense of urgency, and kind of walk the talk. So James, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find out more about you?
Yeah, I've got there's the podcast Dad Mind Matters. It's available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I've also got a YouTube channel of the same name. If you want to see me do lots of terrible dad jokes holding a golden retriever that's probably biting me or wriggling somewhere, then come and say hello. But guys, I just want to say thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to be on the show and to talk to you. And thank you so much for just being patient and forgiving when the food delivery came and the dog invaded the studio. I mean, that to me, that's really kind of you.
Well, you know what? It's our pleasure, James. And hey, it's part of dad life, right? It's part of dad life. So that's
it's dad life.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Well, just like you said, James, when you're talking about things and you have to be at first. Ed's sign off is give yourself grace. And so the best we can do is actually give ourselves grace, but also give our guests grace as well. So more than happy to have had the experience and have had you on the show, and the value that you offered us just individually, but also to those who are listening. So thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. It's been my absolute pleasure.
Yes, and I will do that sign off for you, as we always say to our friends that come on the show. Make sure, don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and remember to give yourself grace. And we'll chat soon, and we'll hear any way we can support you. Take care. All right, sir.
All right, Ed.
What's going on? What'd you get from that today? What's a take home?
I'll say two things. So one, the importance of healthy relationship or partnership in the parenting journey. I think that came through loud and clear. A sub point of that is, your ability to communicate well with a partner is, I think, crucial. And that last point I thought was so valuable to the sense of urgency. James saying, it's been said, the days are long, but the years are short. And so time with your children does go by in the blink of an eye. And so being able to take the moments that you have, even when you feel stretched beyond, and just a 10-minute, we talked about this, like a 10-minute investment can pay huge dividends down the road. So those are my two takeaways.
Yeah. For me, so many, one of the things I would say about being brave, and too many times people will rest, and this is not just a father, but just in life, we look at it, we don't want to be brave, but let's think about what happens if we are brave. We're always thinking about, I don't want to talk, but what happens if we do, and who wins when you are brave? As long as it's done in a good manner, but as long as if you are brave, I think that's important. And also the story of James saying, time never lost a fight, dads. Time never lost a fight. So make the best of what you can with your children and your kids while they can, because like James said, there'll be one day they may not need you anymore, and you're going to end up needing them more than they need you. So that's one of two of many things I got from it. But let's thank the Dad Central Show, sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. We'd love to hear from you. The best way, you can check us out, podcast at dadcentral.ca. Email us, guest suggestions, things you like, things you may not have liked, things we can improve on. We always want to have that. Also, listen 2 replays of this epic conversation called the Dad Central Show, dadcentral.ca/podcast. And also leave us reviews on Apple Podcasts, and also follow us, subscribe on the YouTube channel. And then finally, we have a pile of resources for dads and those who love them at dadcentral.ca. So as always, I'd like to say thank you so much for watching. And as we say, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourselves grace, and we will see you soon. Thanks again. Be well and keep the faith.